Human's final credit saves alien widow. Their love ignites a new life. The song between stars. The proximity alert jolted Lyra from sleep, its shrill tone bouncing off the metal walls of her quarters. She squinted at the chronometer, 3:47 station time. Nobody was scheduled for a supply drop for another 3 months. Display external feed, she mumbled, her voice cracking from disuse. The small view screen flickered to life, revealing the endless black of deep space and something else. A small object tumbled erratically against the backdrop of stars, trailing vapor like a comet's tail. Enhance Sector 4, she commanded, pushing herself upright. The screen zoomed in on what was clearly not debris but a vessel, an escape pod, its hull scorched and compromised. Lyra had been alone on Outpost Helios for 837 days. The communications relay station was designed to operate with minimal crew, but budget cuts had gradually reduced minimal to just her. Most days, her only companions were the automated systems and the distant voices she relayed between Earth's colonies. Now someone was about to break that solitude. She moved quickly through the cramped corridors, medical kit in hand. The station's tractor beam was temperamental at best, and it took 3 attempts before the magnetic clamps finally locked onto the pod. Through the airlock window, she watched as it was drawn into the receiving bay, scraping against the guide rails with a screech that made her wince. When the bay repressurized, Lyra approached the pod cautiously. Its design was unfamiliar, sleeker than human vessels, with what appeared to be crystalline components embedded in the hull. The hatch had partially melted, fused shut by whatever catastrophe had sent it spinning through the void. With a heavy plasma cutter, she carved through the seal. The hatch fell away with a hollow clang, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke. Lyra covered her mouth, peering inside. The occupant wasn't human. Long limbs were folded impossibly tight in the cramped space. Skin the color of deep ocean trenches, with faint luminescent patterns pulsing weakly across its surface. A face that was almost humanoid but with features too sharp, too precise, like a sculpture carved by someone who'd only heard descriptions of people. It wasn't breathing, or at least not in any way Lyra recognized. Hello, her voice sounded foolish in the silence. Can you understand me? No response. The being's eyes remained closed, the glow beneath its skin dimming by the second. Lyra had exactly 2 options, leave it to die or help. The first would be safer, smarter even. Her station wasn't equipped for alien biology. Command would probably order her to secure the pod and wait for extraction. She reached forward and placed her fingers against its neck, searching for a pulse. Instead, she felt a subtle vibration, like standing near a massive subwoofer playing the lowest possible note. Okay, she whispered, let's get you inside. The being was lighter than she expected, its body temperature cooler than human norm. Lyra managed to half-drag, half-carry it to the station's medical bay, a generous term for what was essentially a cot with some basic equipment and her emergency supplies. The diagnostic scanner hummed uselessly, displaying a series of error messages. Unknown physiology, unable to establish baseline parameters, seek qualified xenobiological assistance. Fantastic, Lyra muttered. The nearest xenobiologist was 16 light minutes away, and that assumed any would be willing to help without official clearance. The alien's luminescence continued to fade. Something about those lights reminded her of neural patterns of thoughts dimming, dying. Lyra made a decision. She calibrated the medical nanites to their most adaptive setting and injected them at what she hoped was a circulatory junction. It was a desperate move. The nanites could just as easily kill as heal if the biological systems were too different. For 3 agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then the lights beneath the skin flared briefly before settling into a steadier rhythm. The vibration beneath her fingers strengthened. She exhaled, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. There you go, she said softly, stay with me. The station's power reserves dipped, the lights dimming momentarily before stabilizing. Helios wasn't designed to support additional life support systems. Every hour she kept the medical bay at full capacity was draining precious energy she couldn't easily replace. Over the next 12 hours, Lyra barely left the medical bay. She monitored the alien's vital signs through improvised means, noting patterns in the bioluminescence, tracking the subtle shifts in vibration. She cleaned wounds she barely understood, lacerations that seemed to leak light rather than blood, burns that shimmered with strange colors. When its eyes finally opened, Lyra nearly dropped the water pack she'd been preparing. They were mesmerizing, no whites or pupils, just swirling depths of indigo and silver like twilight skis captured in spheres. Those eyes fixed on her unblinking. Hi, she said, offering a tentative smile. You're on Outpost Helios, I'm Lyra. The alien's mouth moved, but what emerged wasn't speech, it was music. A cascade of notes that seemed to hang in the air, resonating at frequencies that made the small hairs on Lyra's arms stand on end. I don't understand, she admitted. The being raised a four-fingered hand slowly, touching its chest. The notes came again, different this time, shorter. Is that your name? Lyra asked. A slight incline of the head, perhaps a nod. I'll call you. She listened to the notes again. Thuron, is that close? Another nod, more definite this time. The station's comm system chirped. Incoming transmission from Central Command, Priority Level 2, announced the automated voice. Lyra's stomach tightened. I need to take that, please stay here. In her communications hub, she accepted the transmission, positioning herself to block the view of the corridor leading to medical. Commander Roth's stern face filled the screen. Officer Nakamura, our long-range scanners detected an unscheduled docking event at your station approximately 14 hours ago. Lyra kept her expression neutral. Yes, sir, I intercepted some debris that could have compromised the communications array. Interesting. Care to explain why your station's power consumption has increased by 37%? She hadn't expected them to notice so quickly. I've been running diagnostics on the affected systems, sir. The debris impact caused some fluctuations in the environmental controls. Roth's eyes narrowed. You're required to report all incidents immediately, Nakamura. The communications array was briefly offline during the impact. I was waiting to restore full functionality before filing my report. The lie came smoothly, surprising herself. Send a full inventory of the debris. We'll dispatch a retrieval team in 3 days. 3 days, Lyra's mind raced. Sir, the retrieval isn't necessary, it's just scrap metal. Nevertheless, we'll collect it, regulations. His tone made it clear the discussion was over. Command out. The screen went dark. Lyra leaned heavily against the console, heart hammering. What had she gotten herself into? When she returned to medical, Thuron was sitting upright, examining the nanite injector with evident curiosity. His movements were fluid, almost hypnotic. They're coming, she said, knowing he wouldn't understand the words. In 3 days. Thuron set down the injector and produced another series of notes, more complex this time, overlapping melodies that seemed to ask a question. Lyra shook her head. I wish I understood you. The alien considered her for a moment, then held out his hand, palm up. After a hesitation, Lyra placed her hand in his. His skin was cool and smooth, like polished stone. Thuron closed his eyes, and the bioluminescent patterns across his skin shifted, flowing up his arm and across their joined hands. Where they touched Lyra's skin, she felt a tingling sensation, neither pleasant nor painful, just strange. Then she heard it, not with her ears but somehow inside her mind. A single clear note that carried meaning, gratitude. You're welcome, she whispered, astonished. Over the next 24 hours, their communication evolved. Through touch, Thuron could transmit simple concepts directly into her consciousness, translated into musical phrases that somehow conveyed meaning. She learned he was a diplomat, or perhaps scholar was a better translation, specializing in cultural harmonies, whatever those were. He had escaped an attack of some kind. His family unit had been targeted, killed. Political assassination was the closest concept Lyra could understand from the mournful melody he shared. The station's power continued to dwindle. Lyra shut down non-essential sections, rerouting energy to keep medical functioning and maintain minimal life support. The temperature dropped to conserve heat. She brought extra blankets to medical, offering one to Thuron. He took it with a grateful nod, then gestured to her supply cabinet. What do you need? She asked. Thuron stood still, unsteady, and approached the cabinet. He selected several metal instruments, a scalpel, forceps, a reflex hammer, and arranged them carefully on the examination table. Then he tapped each with a finger, producing different tones. Lyra watched, puzzled, as he rearranged them, testing the sounds they made. Finally satisfied, he played them in sequence, simple at first, then increasingly complex patterns. She recognized what he was doing. You're creating an instrument. He nodded, then held out his hand again. When their skin touched, the musical thought was clear. Teach me your language, I will teach you mine. As the hours passed, Thuron's makeshift instrument became their Rosetta Stone. He demonstrated how his people communicated through musical patterns, not just sounds but intricate harmonies that conveyed complex ideas. In return, Lyra spoke simple phrases, allowing him to match words to melodies. By the end of the second day, Thuron could form rudimentary sentences. Your people, come soon. Yes, Lyra confirmed. Tomorrow, they think I found debris, not you. They will take me. She nodded grimly, I think so, and they won't let you go. The luminescence across his skin dimmed. I must continue my family's song not finished. What does that mean? Thuron's long fingers played a haunting sequence on his improvised instrument. Last of my lineage now must complete our harmony, our truth. Through their touch communication, Lyra understood more clearly. His family had discovered something, corruption, conspiracy involving both their species. The attack had silenced them, but Thuron had escaped with evidence. The retrieval team arrives in 16 hours, Lyra said, checking the chronometer. We need a plan. As she spoke, the station lights flickered ominously. The power reserves had dropped below 20%. Thuron looked at her with those otherworldly eyes. His hand found hers, and the musical thought was both simple and profound. We are not alone in this void. For the first time in 837 days, Lyra felt something beyond the isolation of her posting. Something that felt remarkably like hope. Harmonies of homes. Lyra watched the military transport approach through the viewport, its sleek hull bearing the unmistakable insignia of Special Operations Command. Not a simple retrieval team, this was an extraction unit. They know, she said quietly. Thuron stood beside her, his luminescent patterns pulsing with anxiety. Since their breakthrough in communication, his speech had improved rapidly, though his sentences still carried the rhythmic cadence of his native language. How did they discover? He asked. I don't know, Lyra turned from the viewport, but we have less than 30 minutes before they dock. The station's lighting had dimmed to emergency levels, power reserves critically low. She'd sacrificed everything to keep Thuron alive, environmental controls in unused sections, long-range communications arrays, even gravity stabilizers in the lower decks. Now they were running out of both power and time. Lyra moved with purpose to the command console. There's a maintenance shuttle in the auxiliary bay, small, efficient, designed for station repairs. It has enough fuel to reach Junction Outpost Delta. They will follow, Thuron observed. Not if they can't. Lyra's fingers flew across the console, entering command codes that hadn't been used since the station was commissioned. I'm setting the fusion core to destabilize, not a full detonation, just enough to disable their systems while we escape. Thuron's eyes widened, the swirling indigo depths catching the emergency lights. You would sacrifice your post, your career. Lyra didn't hesitate, yes. A series of musical notes emerged from Thuron, not speech, but something deeper. Through their bond, Lyra understood it was a sound of reverence, of honor. We must hurry, she said. Gather anything that might help explain what happened to your family. While Thuron collected his makeshift instrument and the data crystal recovered from his escape pod, Lyra packed essential supplies. Ration packs, medical nanites, emergency beacon disruptors. The military vessel was now close enough that she could see figures moving behind its viewports. Station Helios, this is Captain Vega of the Reclamation. Prepare for immediate boarding and quarantine procedures, a stern voice announced over the comm system. Lyra ignored it, sealing her survival pack and slinging it over her shoulder. Ready. Thuron nodded, his skin glowing brighter with determination. They moved swiftly through the darkened corridors toward the auxiliary bay. The station's VI continued to announce docking procedures and unauthorized access warnings, but Lyra had locked out the central controls. It would buy them precious minutes. The maintenance shuttle was little more than a cockpit with attached cargo space, unglamorous but functional. Lyra initiated the launch sequence while Thuron secured their supplies. Through the small viewport, they watched as magnetic clamps extended from the military vessel, preparing to force a connection to the main airlock. Lyra's hands trembled slightly as she entered the final destabilization code for the fusion core. 10 minutes until system failure, she announced. We need to be clear of the blast radius. The shuttle's engines flared to life just as a violent shudder ran through the station. They're attempting emergency override, Lyra explained, disengaging the docking clamps. With a lurch, the small craft pulled away from Outpost Helios. Lyra guided it on a trajectory that kept the station between them and the military vessel, masking their heat signature. There, she pointed to a field of debris ahead, remnants of an abandoned mining operation. We can hide there until. The explosion cut her off. Not the controlled destabilization she had programmed, but something more violent. The station's core had cascaded into full meltdown, sending a shockwave that caught their shuttle and sent it tumbling. Warning lights flashed across the console. Lyra fought with the controls, trying to compensate as they spun through the debris field. Metal fragments pinged against the hull like deadly hail. Thuron's long fingers reached past her, adjusting the stabilizer controls with unexpected precision. The shuttle responded, leveling out just enough for Lyra to regain control. "How did you know to do that?" she asked, breathless. "The harmonics," he replied. The engine's vibration was discordant. They watched in stunned silence as Outpost Helios, Lyra's home for over 2 years, broke apart in a brilliant explosion. The military vessel had backed off, clearly damaged but still operational. "They will recover," Thuron said softly. "They will search." "I know." Lyra plotted a course away from the debris field, staying close to larger fragments to mask their signature. "Junction Outpost Delta is 3 days from here. It's an independent trading hub, no military presence, minimal regulations. 3 days in a shuttle designed for short repair missions, 3 days with dwindling oxygen and power. But it was their only chance. The journey was harrowing. They shut down all non-essential systems to conserve power. The temperature dropped until their breath formed crystals in the air. They took turns sleeping, one always watching for pursuit while the other huddled under thermal blankets. During those quiet hours, their bond deepened. Through touch and music, Thuron shared the story of his people, a species called the Nemerai, masters of harmonic science who had chosen isolation after initial contact with humans had ended in misunderstanding and conflict. "My family line were keepers of cultural exchange," he explained as they drifted through the emptiness. "We believed isolation was a mistake. We discovered corruption, both human and Nemerai officials profiting from conflict. That's why they were killed," Lyra realized, "to prevent an alliance." Thuron nodded solemnly. "The truth is in the crystal, evidence of meetings, transactions, but without translator, humans cannot understand." "And I'm your translator now," Lyra said softly. His luminescent patterns pulsed in what she now recognized as affirmation. "More than translator, you are harmony partner." The term carried layers of meaning she couldn't fully grasp, but its significance was clear in the way Thuron's glow intensified when he said it. On the third day, as their oxygen levels dropped to critical levels, Junction Outpost Delta appeared against the backdrop of stars, a sprawling structure of interconnected modules and docking arms, surrounded by ships of various designs and origins. "No registry codes," Lyra warned as they approached. "We dock anonymously or not at all." She guided their shuttle to a peripheral docking arm where oversight was minimal. The clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk, and recycled air hissed into their cabin, smelling of metal and too many species sharing too little space. Lyra pulled a hooded jacket from her pack. "Your appearance will attract attention. Keep your head down and stay close." Junction Delta teemed with life, a crossroads for traders, mercenaries, exiles, and opportunists from a dozen worlds. The central promenade was a cacophony of languages and scents, illuminated by harsh artificial lighting that cast long shadows. Thuron's steps faltered as they entered the crowded space, overwhelmed by the sensory assault. Lyra took his hand, steadying him. Through their touch, she felt his disorientation. "Focus on my voice," she murmured. "We need to find someone with connections to the underground networks." They moved through the crowd, avoiding the gaze of security drones that occasionally buzzed overhead. Lyra led them to a less trafficked section where small businesses operated in the margins, repair shops, information brokers, identity forgers. Outside a dingy establishment labeled Harmonic Frequencies, Thuron suddenly stopped. "Here," he said urgently. The shop's entrance was barely visible, wedged between a noodle stand and a parts recycler. Through the grimy window, Lyra could see shelves lined with instruments from various worlds, some recognizable, others utterly alien. A bell chimed as they entered. The proprietor, a heavyset human with augmented auditory implants protruding from his temples, looked up from a workbench. "We're closed," he grunted, then froze as his eyes fell on Thuron. "Nemerai," he whispered, the word filled with disbelief. Before Lyra could react, the man hurried to lock the door and activate privacy screens over the windows. "Are you insane?" he hissed. "There's a bounty on any Nemerai found outside their territory." "We need help," Lyra said firmly, "and you recognize what he is." The man studied them both, conflict evident in his expression. "Name's Procor. I was a xenomusicologist before the contact embargo. Now I just sell instruments and keep my head down." Thuron stepped forward, removing his data crystal. "You understand our harmonics." "Enough to know I never thought I'd see one of you alive again," Procor replied. "What's this about?" Over the next hour in the back room of the shop, they explained everything: the assassination, Lyra's rescue, their narrow escape. Procor listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his deep knowledge of Nemerai culture. This evidence, he said finally, examining the crystal, it could change everything. There's been rumors for years about why the Nemarai severed contact so abruptly. Can you help us reach someone who can use it? Lyra asked. Procor hesitated. There's a network. Humans, Nemarai, others who believe in cooperation. They operate in shadows, avoiding those who profit from division. My family was part of this network, Thuron said, his voice carrying a mournful melody. I suspected as much. Procor moved to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a sophisticated communications array. I can arrange a meeting, but it will take time. Meanwhile, you'll need disguises, credentials, somewhere safe to stay. For 3 tense days, they remained hidden in rooms above Procor's shop. Lyra monitored communications channels for any sign they'd been tracked. Military bulletins reported the destruction of Outpost Helios as a tragic accident, no mention of survivors or alien involvement. On the 4th night, Procor brought them to a secluded chamber deep within Junction Delta's maintenance sections. 7 figures waited there, 3 humans, 2 Nemarai, and 2 beings of species Lyra didn't recognize. One of the Nemarai stepped forward, skin glowing with patterns that mirrored Thuron's. When they touched, a haunting melody filled the room, a greeting, a recognition. Council of Harmonies, Procor announced. I present Thuron, last survivor of the 7th lineage, and Lyra Nakamura, former Earth Alliance communications specialist. The data crystal was placed in a specialized reader. As its contents displayed on a holographic interface, the council members watched in grim silence. Evidence of collusion between military factions on both sides, manufactured incidents designed to maintain tension and justify weapons development. This confirms what we've suspected, one of the human council members said. With this, we can finally approach the civilian governments directly. The other Nemarai turned to Thuron, speaking in their musical language. Thuron responded, his notes rising and falling in complex patterns. They say Thuron's family harmony remains incomplete, Procor translated for Lyra. It requires a final movement, the public revelation of truth. And they ask if you will join him, added one of the human council members. Your testimony as his rescuer would add weight to his account. Lyra looked at Thuron, remembering the dying light beneath his skin when she'd found him, the quiet moments in the shuttle when they'd shared thoughts through touch and music. She thought of Outpost Helios, now nothing but scattered debris. I already have, she said simply. In the weeks that followed, the Council of Harmonies worked tirelessly to compile the evidence into an undeniable case. Lyra learned that Thuron's position was more significant than she'd realized. His lineage had been entrusted with centuries of cultural exchange knowledge. Together, they crafted a message that would bypass military channels and reach civilian populations directly. Thuron composed a harmonic sequence that would authenticate the message for his people, a family melody that could not be forged. On the day the transmission was ready, Thuron took Lyra's hands in his. My people have concept, he said, his voice carrying the musical cadence she'd grown to love. Resonant souls, 2 beings whose life songs harmonize naturally, rare even among Nemarai. Through their touch, she understood what he couldn't fully express in words, that whatever happened next, their songs had become irreversibly intertwined. After this, Lyra said, there will be no going back for either of us. Thuron's skin glowed with a warmth that had become familiar. Forward is only direction that matters. As the council transmitted their evidence across both human and Nemarai networks, Lyra stood beside Thuron, their fingers lightly touching. It wasn't the life she had imagined when she accepted her lonely posting on Outpost Helios. It was something far braver, far more vital, a harmony of 2 worlds beginning with them.